I believe that leadership should be inspirational. I think that you should be inspired by leaders, and leaders that can inspire have people that are willing to do anything for them.
Welcome back to Case Studies. I'm excited to be here with my good friend, longtime friend. We were just talking about it before we came down. We met in a super kind of random way. I can't even remember who had me go to CrossFit Hyperion. I literally can't even remember who invited me. And I went, and it was a ways away from my house. It was probably 15 to 20 minutes away from my home. And it ended up being about a decade that I'd go every day, drive to this gym, and this was your gym. You and Trevor, you guys put this together, and there was this really cool culture of community and family and hard work, and like that CrossFit at that point in my life became really important to me. It gave me, a lot of sense of meaning and pride of doing hard things every day. And yeah, that was kind of where the relationship started, and it's been fun to follow your career. So I'm excited to delve into like this life of Bruce Roberts. So
yeah, thanks, Casey. You're right. CrossFit, one of the things that draws people to it is so much about the community. And like any business, the culture that you foster and cultivate is going to keep people and bring them to you and keep them there. And, I feel like we had a good culture there and a good group. And it was a place where, people could go and work hard and have positive reinforcement and feel good about themselves. And like you said, feel good about putting in some hard work every day and seeing some results, and then having that, set the tone for the rest of your day.
Well, the people who, haven't done CrossFit, there's so many ties to military.
It's true.
With the CrossFit, they really try to honor kind of these heroes that have died in battle, and they actually have their hero workouts. And so they kind of memorialize, the people that have died defending our country. And those were always like such special workouts for me, that there was like this significance. And even to this day, the 4th of July or Memorial Day, I try to do Murph every single time, which Murph is, you do 20 sets of 5 pull-ups, 10. No, what's the number? It's 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats.
Right. Divide it up however you want.
Run 2 miles.
Total of 2 miles. Yeah.
And then you do it again.
Yeah.
With a weight vest.
Yeah.
And the significance is, when you're kind of in special forces or whatever, you're always carrying a weight vest. You're always carrying an equipment vest that kind of has all your supplies.
Yeah, body armor. That body armor, that's a minimum, right? I mean, normally you're going to carry a lot more than that, but that's the kind of the minimum weight, and so you at least do it with your body armor on. But you're right. Like in the early days of CrossFit, there were some Navy SEALs and other guys in the special operations community that kind of just got involved very early on and saw the value in that kind of training and what it did, how it was very complementary to both military and law enforcement and the kind of the physical demands of, and so it just became, it kind of grabbed a niche following very early on in those communities. And then they started, honoring some of these fallen heroes with these, like you mentioned, the hero workouts, which are usually, like you said, really tough. Yeah, they're meant to be tough. It's meant to, be a time when you kind of dig deep mentally in order to honor somebody's sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah. So the reason I bring this up, you've spent most of your life kind of in the service of our country. That was kind of your life for 26, 27 years. For all the time that I knew you, there'd be a month, 2 months, 3 months where you just disappear and you weren't at the gym, and I'd see you somewhere overseas, and then you'd come back, and so talk to me about, maybe we kind of go back to the beginning on, what took you into the military. And then what I really want to dive into is leadership and just kind of what you learned along the way. I think when I was thinking about the theme of this podcast, what's always struck me about yourself is how strong of a leader you are.
Thank you.
And not so much words. Words are important, but actions and just showing up and consistency, you were always a leader to me, and so much of it was by example. And so I want to get into that and kind of, go into the lessons that you've learned from 26, 27 years and working in around special forces and just kind of what you've learned in that time. So go back to kind of where you grew up and what took you into the military.
Yeah, thanks. So I grew up I was as a kid in Idaho, and then I moved to California in junior high. And I was one of those kids that, didn't have a lot of direction, came from a divorced household, and, my family life they just weren't, my parents weren't super involved. And so I was not one of those. If I look back on it now, in high school, I see, kids who had their parents were super involved, and they were kind of guiding them along the way and pushing them to go take SATs and to do well and make sure, if they were playing sports, they make sure that somebody was there to see their sport and to kind of help them, guide them into an opportunity to maybe go to college or something.
Yep.
Well, that wasn't me. So if we're being frank, I got good enough grades to kind of keep my mom off my back. I hope she doesn't see this. And I was a good athlete. I played soccer. I was good at it, but and I probably should have gone to college on that. But I didn't have a dad that was involved, that was kind of helping make sure that scouts saw me, or anyone pushing me to make sure that I applied to college on time. And so I was a decent student. I had some advanced placement classes and a good athlete, but I just didn't have a lot of, I was a young kid. I was, 17, 18 and not thinking about the future and not planning, as so many of us do.
Just short-sighted.
And just letting life push you along.
And I think about that with my kids now. Like, my wife is, I'm in it, but my wife is just so conscientious about every single kid and their classes, and just trying to like nudge them and push them and get them on that right path.
Yeah.
And not having that, there's just a lot of danger. You know what I mean? Like, you're making like life altering long-term decisions.
Right.
And like without a guide, it's like walking into the jungle without a guide,
100%, and I think it, my experience heavily influences the way I parent now. Like, I want to give my kids these opportunities. I want to be involved. And my two boys, like we talked about before the podcast, but, I look back and I was kind of a wayward kid. I graduated high school with no plan, right? I didn't even take an SAT because, every time it popped up on Saturday, I was busy playing a soccer tournament and nobody was making a choice for me.
Yeah.
A wise choice. I was just like, I'd rather go play soccer.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a big plan. And when I was 17, I was in this competition civics class. And I remember everybody in the class really had a great plan. And these were all the smart kids in high school, and I was on this team and we were being interviewed about what you wanted to do next. And it was like, going down the panel, and it's like, well, I'm going to go to Stanford. I'm going to go to Berkeley, and they get to me and they're like, well, I said, well, I'm going to be an airborne ranger, and they were like, what? And I didn't really have a plan. So I thought I'd join the Army.
But like the desire to go do it, was it romanticized? Was it just like you looked at these guys and said, man, this is like something that it just calls to me, like what do you think it was drawing you into the military?
I had some family, like, my grandpa served in World War I, my dad served in Korea. I had an uncle that was a Green Beret, and I just I loved playing with G.I. Joes growing up. I just always had kind of a tendency towards that. And since I didn't really have another plan, I just thought, well,
this is a track.
I'm going to join the Army.
Yeah.
My mom wouldn't let me. A year later, I graduated high school. I moved out of California because it was too expensive. I went up to Idaho to be by my dad and my brothers. And, I'm up there and I'm delivering pizzas for Pizza Hut. And I'm, trying to go to night school at Boise State because, you're supposed to go to college. So I figured I should try to figure that out. And I remember, this is going to show my age a little bit, but I'm looking in the newspaper and it says, need money for college. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. It's like, dial 1-800, go guard. And I'm like, oh, shoot. All right. And so it kind of like reignited the opportunity.
Yeah.
So I ended up calling the recruiter and joining the the Idaho National Guard. And it's funny because the recruiter asked me, he said, well, what do you want to do? I can give you a skill, you can learn how to be an electrician or this or that. And I thought, nope, I want to go blow shit up. And he was like, oh, I got just the job for you. We'll put you in the infantry. So, anyway, I joined the Army. I went through all of my initial training, and this is for the Idaho Guard. So I was going to be a part-time guy. And I did, once again, I kind of flourished there. Like I did well. Like I graduated like top of my class. I was shooting expert. I had like, max PT scores, so I was like good at this. And so when I got back from,
did it give you confidence?
It
like
did.
As you kind of got, because I imagine like at that age, those years are like so impressionable.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You're lost a bit. And like, having like somebody believe in you or something that you're excelling at, like it's got to be something where you just get like a taste of like, hey, I could be good at this. I could excel.
And I think you hit it on the nose. It's like where you can excel, where you get some positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Like I liked playing sports because I was good at it because I would get positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People would tell you how good you are and that, helps kind of motivate you. And I think it was the same thing in the military. Like I went there and I did well at it. And I was like, well, I can excel at this. I'm top in all these different areas. And so, for me to leave that and then go back to my kind of working at Pizza Hut, it felt
like the purpose or the meaning was just out the door.
It felt so insignificant,
I remember having this experience where I came home off my mission.
Yeah.
And it's just this rich, fulfilling experience. You're growing, you're serving, you're in leadership roles,
It feels meaningful.
It like tremendous purpose.
Yeah.
And then I remember I come home and my mom's doing my laundry again. It was like summer. And I was like, I got to get out of here like this fast, like what you're describing with like, I go and just have this experience. And then all of a sudden, like I'm delivering pizzas. You're just like, get me out of here.
That was 100%. That was 100%. And I thought, this, being in the Army feels like you're part of something. You feel like it was meaningful. I feel like I was good at it. I was getting, positive reinforcement. And so to go back into that other life, I was like, all right, this isn't for me. I got to go do something. And so I ended up joining up active duty. And they sent me to, my first duty station was Fort Stewart, Georgia. So they sent me to Georgia. And so that was, how I kind of ended up in the Army initially. And I'll tell you after that, my first enlistment, I joined as a private, starting from the bottom was 3 years. And, one thing I noticed was that I was like, I'm good at this, but this maybe isn't the right fit for me because, I feel like I could do more.
You just didn't feel like it was tapping into like your potential.
Yeah. I mean, I was one of the smarter guys, and just excelled easily. And, among the enlisted ranks, there's a lot of guys that don't have any other options. And that's why they join because they're looking for something. And it could be just a job or some college money or some security. And then there's, obviously there's a lot of patriotic people in there too. But, you get in that first enlistment, those young kids that join the Army,
you get the whole mix.
You just get this mix. Yep. Yeah. And so I excelled. I promoted really quickly. And I remember I decided to get out and go back to college. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm ready now. I think I've figured this out.
You matured a little bit.
I've matured. I spent 3 years. I spent a year and a half of that over in Korea on the DMZ.
Because something that I've always admired about military, and you get this in sports as well, is like the discipline,
right?
The consistency of purpose and the discipline, and like those habits. You think about how impressionable those are at a young age, and how they go with you forever. You know what I mean? Like they just instill in you this discipline and like this like.
Well, I think there's a lot of similar lessons on a mission, right?
Yeah,
you have to be a very disciplined, regimented lifestyle.
I think about it. It changed my life.
Yeah,
I went pretty lost to like. I came out of that like with a plan, and there was structure. There was structure around even just my identity of this is who I am.
Yeah,
and this is the type of person I'm going to be going forward that I didn't have before I went into that 2 years.
So I just realized I had more potential, and I thought, you know what, I need to go get out and take my GI Bill, take this opportunity and go back to college. And I remember some of my leadership trying to talk me into saying that, hey, we need good guys like you to stick around. We need, smart, talented, like enlisted leaders too. And I thought, but it's not for me. Like I got to go. And so I got out and I actually moved here to Utah at that point. And that just landing here was completely random. You know, I had a cousin that lived here. I was getting out of the Army from overseas.
No church ties or anything? Like it wasn't, was that like somewhere in the family? Like
it was.
Yeah.
No, it was. There were some church ties from my family. I had been to Utah, you know, before. I liked it. I knew it was a good place. I'd stopped here a couple times. I actually went to a soccer camp at BYU when I was in high school. So I had some ties here.
Yeah.
And so I had some family living here, and I called a cousin that I'd always been close with, and he said, "Hey man, if you want to come here, I'll give you a place and you know, I'll give you a place to stay and a job till you get on your feet." And I thought, okay, done.
That's all I need.
Yeah, that's all I need. So I landed here in Utah, and I started going to Utah Valley University, which I like to call the Harvard of the Wasatch.
Yeah,
it's a little known. You could spread that if you will, if you want to. And so I started going there, and I remember. So you talk about the discipline you carry over from the military. I'd come from a very disciplined environment in the military, being combat arms, a young enlisted leader, you know, at 21.
I mean, that's young.
Yeah, and at that point, my leadership, you know, I was still very, you know, I was in charge of four or five guys, you know, that were, you know, younger than me, and it's like still a very junior learning process, but even having that amount of leadership at that young age and responsibility, like, you know, I had to show up for them, and I had to be somebody, and I had to set an example, and I had to hold standards. And so when I got to college, I remember just being a little bit out of my element at first, because I would show up to class and kids would be late to class. And that was
drive you nuts.
Mind blowing to me. Like, how disrespectful is it for you to walk into this classroom late? I mean, I was like, and then they would fall asleep in class. And, you know, and from my world, if you fall asleep during pure instruction, like you were going to get lit up. You know, you're lucky if you don't get, you know, knocked out of your chair, and you can take out back and smoke you for 30 minutes, you know, to learn the lesson. You never fall asleep. Yeah. So I would see that happening in the college classroom. And I'd be like, how is this happening? You know, I couldn't believe it that it was just this loose. But interesting how, you know, this calling to the military kind of, I did a year of just being a long-haired hippie college student. And then kind of year two coming into it, I ran into a guy in the gym actually, and he was wearing an Army t-shirt, and we started chit-chatting, and we found out we were both like, had got off of active duty and we're going to school. And he said, "Hey, you should join the Utah Guard with me." And I'm like, I think I'm been there, done that. I think I'm good. And he's like, "No," he's like, "There's this special forces unit here, you know, send you to airborne school, you get to jump out of planes." And I was like, "Oh man, that's something I always wanted to do." And he's like, "You know, and you can help pay for college." And I was getting the GI Bill, but I could get more benefits if I was also serving. So I thought, you know, and it was a really easy transition case for me to go back to what I knew.
Yeah, it was almost more comfortable.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. And so I joined ROTC. I got a scholarship to pay for the rest of my college. You know, boom, off and running, right? So I still, though, I only planned on doing it part-time. I thought, you know, I like this. There's a comfort level for me here. I'm good at it, and I like serving. I like being a part of that team. But I was still planning on being just a part-time guy. So meaning that when I graduated college, I would commission as an officer, and I would, you know, serve in the Utah National Guard as a part-time soldier. And then I really wanted to go into international business.
Yeah.
Right. Well, here's what happened. I graduate college. I go off to my what they call the infantry officer basic course at Fort Benning, Georgia. And while I'm in the infantry officer basic course, 9/11 happens.
Wow. Because graduating college matters a lot, right?
Right.
Doesn't it give you like a different status? You kind of come in at a different level.
I'd been enlisted when I had just joined the Army, but now that I had a college degree and I'd gone through a commissioning program, I was coming in as an officer. So now
which matters. Walk me through, because I'm a bit ignorant to the different levels, but I do know that officer track is a different track.
It's very different. So, you know, enlisted is that you just join without any education. Anybody can join but then you can work your way up, and you have different levels of leadership. So you can go from enlisted, like a level 1, to what they call an E9. So the highest enlisted rank, which is a sergeant major, which is pretty awesome. The officer track, you know, the officer always has the ultimate burden of responsibility. So anything that happens or doesn't happen in the organization is ultimately the officer's, responsibility.
Yeah.
You join as lieutenant and you go all the way up, and you can become a general. And now you have to have an education, and you have to go through some type of commissioning program to take that officer track.
Yeah.
The enlisted leaders are your supposed to be your subject matter experts and be the advisors to the officer, but their authority is all derived from the officer that they serve with. So depending on what level they're, advising that officer, their authority is derived from the officer.
Officer's always senior.
Always.
Yeah.
And you always have the ultimate responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. So like when you make decisions, those are the decisions that people's lives hang on, when you're making those decisions in combat.
Yeah.
And when something happens in the organization, it falls on you. It falls on you.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I went in as an officer, and I had planned on being part-time. I'm at Fort Benning, 9/11 happens. And the next day, our commander comes out, and we're all lieutenants, and he comes out and says, boys, we're at war, and there's some people that need to die in this world, and it's our job to do it. And we're going to be busy. And so, that's what started my officer career for 20 years.
I think anybody, like 9/11 is one of those moments.
It is. Everybody knows exactly where
you were at. Like, and I was a young kid. I was, I think 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
I remember I was working at a title company. My brother had a title company, and it had kind of this job in the fall right after I graduated. Mm-hmm. And I remember like seeing the screen, and you're seeing it happen, and you see that first building burning, and then the second one hits, and you're like, oh, like,
not an accident.
This isn't an accident. We're being attacked. And then the significance of like, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And we went with Gary Stevenson, Elder Stevenson. He's senior kind of leader in the LDS church. And we went down to Kansas City a week ago for Mormon night. And like he threw out the first pitch.
Oh, cool.
And we were getting after him because like, he didn't throw a strike. It was like down and to the left. But we were talking about this, like George Bush, like in like that moment and like his leadership moment mm-hmm. where he steps up. And I still remember him at Yankee Stadium going out, and he freaking threw a, really good strike. It was kind of like, we're coming. But like, it's so funny kind of putting all these things together because, in that moment, you're part-time.
Right.
Like, without the desire to ever be full-time, and then life happens. And that event had to have like forever changed your life.
Well, it did, because I didn't plan on making the military career at that point. Right. I liked it. I liked serving. I wanted to do it part-time, but I didn't know how long I would do it. I didn't plan on making a career, but then all of a sudden 9/11 happens, and we were busy. And, I didn't look up from that until, 13 years later.
And talk to me about busy. What does busy mean?
It just means that, it was growth opportunity in the Army at that point. They needed people, they needed leaders. There was no shortage of jobs that needed to be done. And so even though I was technically a National Guard guy, I just got pulled onto, and I didn't join active duty, but I got pulled into these, and I volunteered for them. I just, I started, I deployed over to the Special Operations Command in Korea. And from there I went to Cuba, down to the detention facility. And then I went to Afghanistan, and I just was like, bam, bam, bam.
So, but you're in Korea at like demarcation, like right between North Korea, South Korea, like,
yeah.
And I actually am like intrigued. I want to like talk about each one of these, because I'm like, they're very curious on what that's like. But you're, at a spot where there's high tension. Like, I don't think they've ever said that they're not at war. Like,
yeah, it's just
like
it's been a ceasefire, for 50 years, whatever, 70
But
years.
then you go to Guantanamo Bay, which is like obviously like super controversial.
Very much so.
Every president says they're going to shut it down. Get in office, learn about it, don't shut it down.
Can't do it. That's right. 100%.
Every single one,
They're like, we're getting rid of this. And then then they get the classified briefing. They're like,
okay, we're not going to get rid of it. So you got that. And then you got Afghanistan, which today Afghanistan's way different than 2001 Afghanistan. Like there's been a whole cycle of what that's turned into. And, but talk to me about 2001, what all of that stuff looked like. Get you signing up for those opportunities.
Yeah. So it was easy for me. Like we kind of talked about it, I felt like at home in the military, I felt like I was good at it. So it was easy for me to say, this is just what I want to do for now. And I didn't really think about it beyond that.
Yeah.
And so as these needs would arise or pop up, I'm like, yeah, I'll go serve there. So I got asked by like the Special Operations Command here to go be the liaison officer in Korea, which meant that I was helping to coordinate the training and deployment of special operations units over there, and then we worked with the Korean special operations to kind of integrate our training and equipment.
And who falls under special operations? Like what is Rangers?
Yeah.
So who else? Green Berets?
Yeah, Green Berets, Rangers, like and if you look at it, it was a joint command, right? Meaning that it brings in other services. So now you've got like your Navy SEALs, your Air Force pararescue and combat controllers. And the Marines have the Force Recon, which is set up very similar to Army Green Beret teams.
Yeah.
And so then a command like that brings in all those it's a joint command. So it brings in all the different services. And we worked really closely with the Korean special operations guys, kind of training with them, working with their teams, introducing like, American equipment and techniques and stuff. And I had that one was, maybe a high tension type area, but you're not active combat.
You're not
over
fighting.
there. Yeah. It's all about, being prepared for that big fight over there and kind of making sure that we're postured to be prepared when, if the North Koreans come across again and decide to kind of reinstigate that.
Yeah.
But that was a really good, I really enjoyed that opportunity over there.
So you go do that. And then that leads to Guantanamo?
And it leads to Guantanamo, yeah. So when I finished that tour, I came back, I went to Guantanamo, and that was a volunteer. They just were they said, we need somebody to go down here. We need a junior officer to fill this specific position. I said, I'll raise my hand, I thought I'll do it.
And talk to me about Guantanamo 2002. Is that when you're there?
2003? 2003, I think.
Because that's got to be like when it was like.
Yeah, actually, so I got down there and I ended up in a really unique position down there. The role I volunteered for, I was an infantry guy, right, at this point. And so they said, hey, we need somebody to go down there and do public affairs, which in the Army, it means public relations. It's like dealing with the press.
That's crazy. You're doing a PR role. At Guantanamo.
At Guantanamo. I got there. So I said, you know what? That sounds interesting. I'll go do it. And so they pushed me through this training course for public relations for the military. And then they said, all right, you're deploying. And we got there right after Abu Ghraib happens. So that big blow up, that scandal in Iraq.
Yeah.
Abu Ghraib, which is like this huge scandal. And then President Bush at the time, now that focus, that kind of lens turned from Abu Ghraib to Guantanamo. So, well, if this is happening at Abu Ghraib.
So remind me about Abu Ghraib. Like what, for people that don't have context, remind me like why that was so significant.
Well, it came out that a lot of there were pictures and some other sources that revealed that a lot of the detainees were being mistreated.
Yeah.
Right. And by American military personnel. And it's true. And they were wrong. And so that mistreatment, all of a sudden, then the assumption is by the media and the public, it's happening everywhere. Yeah. And that lens then turned to Guantanamo, which already had a little bit of a lens on it because they saw it as a place where we could hold them indefinitely without any, rules or laws, because it kind of was like a no man's land, right? It's like it's a military base on Cuba. It's not on their foreign soil.
It's just insane to me. Like even thinking that it exists is kind of insane. Like Cuba's not friendly with us.
No, and I'll tell you about that real quick. But so I volunteered, and right when President Bush said, you know what, we have nothing to hide, and he invited the international press to go down to Guantanamo.
Come on.
So I show up there, and it's like everybody's coming. So, and before I tell you about that, let me just give you a little bit of history on Guantanamo, right? So Guantanamo Bay was after the Bay of Pigs and in the 60s and all that happened with President Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Actually, even before that, when we had friendly relations with Cuba, we had established this base there, and it was a lease agreement. We were leasing this land from the government, and we'd been doing that for years. Well, when Castro overthrew that government and became a dictator down there, our government did not recognize him as the legitimate leader, and so we said, hey, you know what? Like, we have this base, we have this lease agreement, we have it with a legitimate recognized government. We don't recognize you, so we're not leaving. And we're just going to continue to lease the space because it was an indefinite lease, and we'll pay you the money that we had agreed upon with the lease amount, but we're not leaving.
So you just like literally have like the U.S. military like at their doorstep.
Yeah, and it's like, what are you going to do about it, right? So with Castro, we just decided we were going to maintain that base, and we didn't care, right? And so initially, right, when
I'm trying to think through, like
the base had good relations with Cuba, and the gates were open, and Cuban workers were working on the base, and American GIs would go, Navy personnel would go into Cuba and back and forth, and all that was fine. Well, those relations got tense. Incidents happened, people got arrested, and pretty soon, once Castro overthrew the government, within a couple of years, they had to close the gates, and it was like, okay, we can't allow this anymore.
It's almost like a different country.
So it did. It became its own little country. Gates were sealed. There's a demilitarized zone. It's just like, if you've seen the movie A Few Good Men, they got the watchtowers on either side watching each other with Marines and minefields, and nobody goes back and forth. So the base is 100% self-sufficient. Nobody goes into Cuba. Nobody comes across. It's supported from the U.S., via tanker ships that come in there because it's right on the water. So it's got an airfield and obviously like a port there. It's its own little community. It's its own little island on the island.
Insane. That it exists is insane.
Yeah.
So, and it obviously became like kind of opportunistic because you have like the most wanted people in the world.
Right.
It's like, what do you do with them? Do you bring them to American soil? Like,
no.
Where do you place these terrorists? Like, where do you place? What do you even do with them?
What do you do with them when you detain them? And you take them off the battlefield? Well, we had places in country in Afghanistan and Iraq where we'd detain them, but the ones that they sent to Guantanamo were the ones they thought they would be of high intelligence value. It's like, okay, we need to figure this out. And Guantanamo was really about that intelligence gathering mission from these detainees. And you had every 3-letter agency down there because everyone has their different intel requirements. They're all looking for different questions to be answered. And they're trying to analyze and synthesize this information and then use it to prevent attacks.
To try to actually understand the calculus of what's going on, who's who.
Yep.
And are these people talking?
Some do. Some were pretty hardcore, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11 was down there and still is, he was he's hardcore from day one, wasn't going to give up anything. But there was a lot of guys down there that, they were able to get some information out of, and they used that information. I can say that they used the information they gathered to prevent attacks. Now, we can't share how or when, because then it nullifies the value of the informant, the information.
Yeah.
So that's the real conundrum, right, with this type of situation where you can't celebrate your successes. So you're getting a lot of,
you're getting wins, but they're anonymous wins, and you really can't spike the football and take credit for them because really you're
then you lose the value of the intelligence, and if they know that the rest of the network terrorist knows that so and so is talking, all of a sudden they're going to change their operations, right? So you can't.
Have you ever seen Fun with Dick and Jane?
A long time ago.
It was like this Jim Carrey show where he gets the CEO job, and then the building's burning down, and he's meeting with the press. And I just think about you taking this PR role, and all of a sudden it's hey, let's send the international press down to talk with Bruce.
And that's it. I'm like this, lieutenant, and I ended up. It's funny because I ended up in charge of the media relations. So my job, literally every single week, we had a new group of international media. We had people from Europe, from Associated Press, from London Times, CNN, NBC, you name it, everything. Every single week, we got a new group of media would rotate onto the island. And my job with my little team was to kind of orchestrate all of this and take them down the detention facility, kind of give them the tour, line up the interviews with some of the key personnel on the base.
But they're never interviewing detainees.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. No. They didn't have any access to
detainees.
Yeah. But it was very much a departure from being an infantry guy, but it was fascinating. I mean, it was really interesting.
Sounds like it's like a unique, once in a lifetime experience / opportunity.
And I was there when we started the trials, right? So when we started, so we detained these guys for a couple of years, right? This is like 2004, 2005. And now we started this trial process, which they call military commissions, right? And so now we're putting these guys on trial. And I was there. I helped organize the very first, trial session for some of these guys, which was really intense to kind of be in the courtroom, when they're bringing the mastermind of 9/11 up there, and for the first time he's going, in front of a courtroom.
That's so fascinating.
So
So you were there for how many years?
2.
For 2 years.
Yeah.
And then back home to kind of civilized life, or do you just go straight into Afghanistan?
No, I came back here to Utah for almost a year. So I met my wife in Guantanamo, right? She was down there as an Air Force officer. I was an Army officer. We started dating, and then decided that we wanted to kind of try to make it work. So even though we were going to go different directions when we left Guantanamo, she was able to come here to Utah Hill Air Force Base, and then we started dating. And then we ended up getting married like right before I shipped off to Afghanistan. And that was I was there, I left end of 2007, I guess. So I was there for a year, to all of 2008.
Talk to me about Afghanistan 2007.
It was pretty hot at that time. I wasn't over there on the initial surge when we went on. We went there, right after 9/11. So 2001, 2002, we were really heavy in Afghanistan. Kind of died down for a little while, and then it surged up again 2007, 8, 9 timeframe. And I went over there as part of a embedded training team. So we were training Afghans. We were mentors to the Afghan army to kind of help them become more professional, army. But that meant that we did everything with them. We trained with them. We tried to teach them tactics, but we also went on missions with them, in real life, combat missions with them as part of the team. And I was assigned to an Afghan recon company because of my infantry officer background. Yeah. So that was pretty intense.
What's the difference in like military? I know that they were trying to go create independence and go, but like when I go, I'm always like following like all these like Navy SEALs and Special Forces, people. And I remember reading one of Jocko's books where he was talking about that. And it was just, in some scenarios, it felt like you're kind of dragging them along. Like you're,
very much so,
trying to help, but it's not the same level of professionalism. And
no, very, very much not the case. So the American government was funding all of their military at that point, right? We're paying for their salaries and giving them equipment and everything. And we're trying to drive them into being a professional force, and training and, meeting a certain level of standards. And it was, what you saw there was a hodgepodge, and you saw like a developing country where a lot of guys were joining the military because it meant a paycheck.
Yeah. Just to get paid.
Yeah. Unemployment's huge. There's no jobs. You can join the military, and the Afghans are getting paid, like $100 a month or $150 a month, which for them,
it's a lot of money. Yeah.
Especially when there's no other opportunity.
Yep.
And we saw also that there was incentives in their pay. So if they were like on the base, it'd be at a certain rate. But if they were deployed, so if you're outside the base, you're going, on missions and doing stuff, you get paid a little bit more. But what we saw, to be quite frank, is that, a lot of them, they just wanted to do the minimum they wanted to make the most money, but do the minimum amount of work or have the minimum amount of risk.
Yeah.
So they wanted to be off the base so they could make a little more money, but they didn't want to actually
be in combat.
Yeah. They didn't want to take any risk. And I would say that was probably the case for the majority of them, but not all of them. There were some gems there in the rough. There were some good soldiers that just really wanted to do the right thing and kind of make their country better, but there just wasn't enough of those to make a difference. You'd meet some of those guys that were awesome, and I think part of that is because in Afghanistan, they don't have the same kind of national pride that we do. Like it's still very tribal. So they don't see themselves as Afghans.
They see themselves as a part of a tribe.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, there's just not that sense of unity, of national pride. They're still very tribal. That's where their loyalties lie. If you ask them, if you ask us, and they're like, oh yeah, these are all Afghans. And oh, what's their national language? Oh, it's Dari. And for us as an outsider, all of it's very clear.
Yeah.
You ask them the same questions and you will not get the same answers.
Yeah.
If you ask them, well, what are you? They say, well, I'm Pashtun. Okay, well, what's your language? Oh, it's Pashtun. They're not going to say it's Dari that's the national language because they don't see it that way.
Yeah.
Those tribal areas, people have tried to conquer and carve that up
for thousands of years.
Yeah, everyone's failed. I mean, everyone going all the way back to Alexander the Great.
Yeah, you hear the stories of like the USSR kind of coming in there and trying to, with all their military might and tanks and everything, and there's just a lot of people that like have tried and failed. To conquer that people.
Well, it's true. And if you look at like geography, I think it was after World War II when, we were redrawing a lot of lines on the map for Afghanistan and Pakistan. They drew that line right through the tribal area, and they did it on purpose because they were trying to that southern Afghanistan, northern Pakistan area of the Pashtun tribes that's just been refused to be conquered for, generations and centuries. They were trying to break them up. And it didn't work because none of them in that area recognized that line. You know what I mean? Nobody cares.
So, and that's always the confusing thing because you're like, how is Pakistan just like supporting Afghanistan? It feels like it's like a one-way street. You can just do whatever you want. But when you think of it from that lens of like, they don't see it like that. Like this is all like the same.
Yeah, they don't recognize
that
boundary. Like we drew that line. They didn't. They don't recognize that boundary. And it's frustrating for the American military too because it's like, it's like when you're playing kids and you run back across the line, you're like, base. That's basically what the terrorists do. They'd run back across the line in Pakistan and be like, base, and then we're, okay, we can't do anything.
Can't go in there.
Yeah, we can't go in there.
Yeah, I remember that. The raid on Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
And
that was into Pakistan.
Crossing into Pakistan, kind of like right next to the military.
Yeah.
And you're just like, this is embarrassing on so many fronts. Like Pakistan had to have known that he was there. Like you've got the US that kind of goes in, doesn't tell them.
Yep.
Does the raid, gets the job done and bounces. And now you have like this PR, like what's Pakistan going to say? Like, oh, the terrorists that we were harboring, you shouldn't have came in.
But it's
still awkward.
It was super awkward, but that's one of those things where you're like, okay, this is a big enough deal. We're just going to ask forgiveness after the fact, and be like, okay, sorry, not sorry, we had to do it.
Yeah.
Because the opportunity was too great.
So talk to me about that. You're in Afghanistan. You obviously have ties to that country that go really deep. You obviously care about people and,
I do. And a lot of people do. And here's the thing that I'll tell you that, quite honestly, by the end of that year, a lot of us were getting pretty burned out, because you're there and you see this as an opportunity. It's like, look, if I'm here in your country and I'm risking my life and I'm away from my family and I'm doing this, like I'm not here to waste my time. I'm here to make a difference.
Yeah.
I'm here because I want to try to push
help.
This. Yeah. I want to help. I want to push this mission, whatever our objectives are. I want to push them forward as far as as hard as I can. And if I'm going to risk my life to do it, like this means something to me. Right. And, you'd run into a lot of these Afghan soldiers that were so apathetic and they didn't care. And it's like, and after, you'd be like, if you don't care about your country, like, why should I?
Why am I?
Why should I?
Yeah.
And once again, that's not everybody, but you just,
but you saw it when we ultimately pulled out and how quick it crumbled.
Yeah.
Like there was just no,
and there was a lot of that attitude. They were just waiting for us to
structure.
Leave. It was this repeat of what they've seen over and over again for years. Like, you know what? You're going to leave eventually. It's going to go back to what it was. And you see a lot of these military officers you're working with in the Afghan army, and they would straight up tell you this. And what you see them is all they're trying to do is they realize they're just playing the long game. So all they're trying to do is set themselves up to be in a good position
on the next one
when we pull out. Yeah. And so it's so frustrating, just be like, hey, if you guys keep thinking this way, it's never going to change. And so that was frustrating, but to your point, you still do develop ties, you care about the country, you develop friendships, you meet good people,
the human side
along the way.
Yeah.
Yes. that,
you were telling me about you kind of going back in, and it was because of your interpreter, right?
Right.
Yeah. Like tell me about that situation. One, how did you kind of meet that person and get to know them? And then two, like,
so
what event happened where you're like, I got to get involved? Like, this is like,
down the road a little bit. So, I got assigned when I was over there as our interpreter manager for our team, because, we had like a dozen interpreters assigned to us, and we kind of, split them out to different teams within our team to help. And so the guy that I had on working with me, his name was Hamid, super good dude. And he was young at the time. He was like 19. And I got to work with him pretty closely, and you get in some tight situations together. It kind of bonds you. And,
yeah, of course.
And so we got to be good friends, and I managed all the terps, right? So, my job is kind of keep track of them. I'd manage like if you were like the human resource side of things, just, keeping track of these guys, making sure they got paid and assigning them out, and getting new ones. So I was kind of managing that for the team as one of my additional duties. So I got to know a lot of these guys pretty well. And for me, I think I've always been a kind of a people person, and I care a little bit more about people, and I want to help. And so a lot of these guys, their ultimate goal was to try to get to the United States. They wanted to serve their country, but by being an interpreter for the U.S. military, they qualified for this special immigrant visa program. So once they served for a couple of years, they could qualify to go to the States.
Wow.
And so I started trying to help these guys, actively help them in the pursuit of that program.
Yeah.
And I gathered that not everybody in my position would do that, but I tried to help him with the paperwork. And my particular interpreter I got really close with, his name was Hamid, and he lives here in Salt Lake now. And I helped him with his visa packet. And it took me a couple of years, because I stayed with it after I came home. But I eventually got him his U.S. visa, and he came here to Utah because I was here, and some of the team that he served with from the Utah guys were all here. And so he came here. And
come with his family?
Not yet. But I helped him get his first job here. And then, matter of fact, you remember Scott Holmes from the gym?
Yeah.
Yeah. I talked to Scott about it, because this was happening when I was when I opened the gym, and Scott gave him his first job. What a good dude.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So he came, and then I helped him. He'd gotten married before he left. So I helped him get his wife and his brand new daughter over. And honestly, Casey, I think one of the things that I'm most proud of in my military career is that. Because if you look at Afghanistan now, like that little girl who I helped,
you have a different life.
Yeah. Unfathomable, right? Like completely different life. Like her opportunity now growing up as an American and never having known, that situation.
Yeah.
Particularly what it's deteriorated into, where now, you're back to where girls can't go to school and their property, and it's just getting, it's Taliban rule again, right? It's Sharia law type stuff. So I that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is just that
getting him over.
Yeah. I allowed his family, like his wife, his daughter, like their opportunities here are going to be completely different.
So talk to me about leadership. Like in the military that long, in that many different positions, who was the best leader that you ever worked with?
Oh, that's a great question. Gosh, I've had a lot of good ones over the years. And some really bad ones. And I love talking about this topic of leadership. I've had some mentors that I really looked up to for different reasons and for different strengths. And let me just talk about leadership in general in the military for a second. And I'm glad you asked this question. I think the military makes the best leaders because of a couple of things. And that is that it's an organization that needs leaders, and so it intentionally tries to develop them. So there's a program. From day one, they're trying to teach you how to lead people. They're talking about like the values and the traits of a leader and what you should be, and then they're putting you through schooling, right? What we call professional military education, that is meant to then continue to develop,
make you a better leader.
So they're giving you all these tools. Like, this is what it looks like.
Yep.
Right. Here's what we learned that works. Now there's also the implementation side of that things, right? You go out there and you practice leadership, right? And you're trying to put this book knowledge into practice. Yeah. And so I like to say that the military in general, and we can say the Army because it's the biggest service, the Army is the biggest leadership experiment in the world, right? Because you have all these people that are being put into leadership positions meant to learn and excel.
Yeah.
It's an up or out system. You have to continue to promote and move up, or else you were pushed out.
You just time out.
They
you
just
time
say,
out. Hey, you've hit your cap.
Yep. So it's an up or out system. And in doing that and throwing all these people into this leadership experiment and then giving them these tools and then giving these opportunities to lead, like quite honestly, we break a lot of eggs because there's a lot of them that never get it. They aren't good at it. They fail, or they just don't do well. But in the course of pushing people into this experiment, you also create some really, really good ones.
Wow.
Right. Because the ones that excel in that environment, that take these lessons and then they display some natural leadership, traits, and are able to kind of put all of that together. Those are where our greatest leaders come from. These guys that become, 4-star generals and go into politics and just inspire people.
Yeah.
Your guys like General Mattis. Right?
I mean, I read like all these guys' biographies and it just fires me up. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because they're just exceptional leaders. Like,
right.
Leadership is influence, and you have that soft leadership skills that you don't have the formal title, but then with the military, you actually have the formal title.
Right.
So it's like you can actually like just flex that formal muscle and people have to do what you say.
But that's not true leadership.
But there's somebody like the good ones, they have the combo.
Right.
Of like, they don't even need to say it. Like people would run through a wall for them.
100%.
But they do have the ability to say, let's move.
And you're 100% right. And so I think that what the Army does, the military, is it kind of brings these opportunities together for you to exercise your authority, which is not leadership, it's authority, but also to develop your leadership, skills and potential and execute more of that kind of soft power. Now, I'll tell you that in my experience, I felt like you don't need to exercise your authority because you have it. My rank's right there on my chest. Like I'm in charge. I get to make the decision. So I don't need to boss people around.
Is that kind of where you say like there are some bad leaders too?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I think the formal authority, like that's where bad leaders go to.
Yep, they rely on that.
Yeah, because if you can influence somebody from and I see myself doing it as a parent. I'm like trying to like coax my kid to do something, and then I just pull the parent card, which is like you're going to, and you just like ghost.
Right.
But you're not teaching anything in that scenario. You know what I mean? And like you're really not capturing the hearts and minds.
Right.
And the leaders that like I'm endeared to, they had that soft power. You know what I mean? They had that ability to like capture you and inspire you and pull out the greater good.
I think you hit it right there on the head. And so in my mind, yes, you can be a good manager and you can exercise your authority, but I believe that leadership should be inspirational. I think that you should be inspired by leaders, and leaders that can inspire have people that are willing to do anything for them. Right. And that's the type of loyalty you have to cultivate.
What's interesting is like you've been a leader to me, and I haven't actually expressed this to you ever. And so it's fun for me to be able to do it in person. But I remember, that time that I would go to CrossFit, you'd be there every day. You'd be there before everybody else. And in CrossFit, like everybody does the work. Mm-hmm. So it's not like one person sits and tells everybody else to do it. You get in and you do the work. And you'd get in and you would just be top in the class or one of the top in the class every time. And so it was this example of like, you show up, you treat people right, you make them feel good, you make them feel accepted. But then you go lead from the front. And I still remember going through these workouts, and whether it's, the Olympic lifts or rope climbs or handstand walks or these runs, and just in all of them, like you were top and you like instilled this physical discipline personally that led the people that you were working with. So it's one of those things where it was like, that was my experience with you, but there was obviously traits that you picked up. I don't know if it's athletics. I don't know if it's different steps along the way, but it was very natural for you. There was never a time where you got up and gave a speech ever.
Right.
Thanks, but you absolutely led me for a lot of years. And there was a reason. I remember telling you this. I'd drive past 4 or 5 gyms CrossFit boxes were popping up all over back then. It was like, really a
hot.
lot of momentum. But I would go to this particular gym, and I think a lot of it had to do with kind of the culture that you established there.
Yeah.
And there were, the people that went to that gym, very few of them were like in my circle, in my like social circle, but I became really good friends with them. And I think it just attracted people that wanted to work hard, people that were nice, people that were competitive. And anyway, that was kind of my personal hands-on experience with you.
Wow. Thanks,
leading.
Casey. That means a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I found, one of the things, like by going through this kind of leadership crucible, and I will say that I kind of culminated my career. Like I ended up retiring as lieutenant colonel, and I was a battalion commander, which means that I was in charge of about, 400 people. And I had other officers that I was in charge of training and mentoring. And I think that, I told you, I think leaders should be inspirational, right? And a lot of that is your works. It's your deeds, not your words. If you have to do what you say and say what you do, and lead from the front. So it's important for you to be, a master of your craft so that you can kind of demonstrate that, right? And so that's something that you should always be trying to aspire to, so that you can lead from the front, as we like to say. But I think that the people element is what is so critical. And what I mean by that is that the way you treat people, like I don't need to give you orders. I get the last say. I'm in charge. I know that. So what does it hurt me to listen first?
100%.
I should listen. I know I get the last word, right? I don't need to flex that. So listen.
But that
right?
takes a lot of self-confidence, and it takes like self-awareness.
It does.
And I think people lack that. And, if you're insecure, the first place you go is to like this tool of power. You know what I mean? Because it's like, that's where you get certainty.
Yep.
It's like, I need to like get this thing back in line, where if you're comfortable with who you are and where you stand, like you can be like,
and you're right. 100%. And I think that, and I know you've had a lot of these same experiences in your journey, and, with where you're at and the success you've had. And I think that, one of the benefits, once again, to the military is, it's this big leadership experiment, but they push you to be a good leader, and they give you all the opportunities, all the tools. So there's a lot of self-development.
Yeah.
They encourage self-development. They encourage reading lists. You do like different types of personality tests. You do, and all of this is to kind of learn more about you, so you can have that confidence to lead, right? So they encourage you to learn about yourself. Like, what kind of personality are you? How do you respond?
Yeah.
What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So that you know where you can, okay, I need to play to my strengths. I need to work on my weaknesses. But until you become self-aware enough to know what those are, you can't do that. But I think, over the process, the leadership, process in the military, they're really pushing you. And so you have this opportunity to take advantage of, and you can take advantage of it or you can flaunt it. And I think those that take advantage of it and want to become good leaders are willing to go through that learning, that awareness journey.
Yep.
And realize like, hey, these are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. This is where I excel. And then I think that what's really important for me is one, like you said, we talk about that confidence, developing the confidence. And I think a lot of that comes from self-awareness. But then realizing that, people, I'm here to develop people and help these people, right? So like, I don't need to give orders. I can ask people to do things. I can treat people with dignity and respect. I can, and everybody, doesn't matter what your rank is. If you treat people with respect, and if you genuinely care about them and you ask their opinion, you will create people that are like invested in you. Yeah. Right. And believe in you, and they want to support you. And so that's how you get a guy then who's willing to do, anything for you that you ask him to do, is by giving them that mutual respect and treating them like
in the business world, it's the same thing. Like the best leader I've ever personally worked with was my boss, who's a guy named Todd Peterson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
And he was the CEO.
Right.
He could hire, he could fire, he could, cut your pay. He had the ultimate say.
Right.
But you never felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knew it, but he never had to say it. And ultimately, like, he just made you feel special.
Right.
And he had this ability where, like, to this day, like, you've got, so many hundreds, if not thousands of people that would run through a wall for him.
Right.
And it was because of how he made them feel and how he showed up. And I just think certain leaders have that ability to listen.
And to your point, Casey, I think that, you're 100% on the nose, and that's what makes a good leader. And so if you take the Army and the formal training and then the leadership opportunities you have to fail and try and test, and then you combine that with, with that X factor. There's some people that just have like a natural leadership,
that ability. Yeah.
Now you combine these together, and I think that's where we really make our great leaders. And like I said, along the way, we make a lot of mistakes, and we break some eggs, and some don't work out. And one of the things that I found, when we got to that level of become a battalion commander and leading these troops, was that, it's not about me. It's about, the opportunity to train them. One of the quotes I wrote down from a general is that there's a couple of them that I love. And one of them is, you should never miss an opportunity to coach, mentor, and train, because that's your job as a leader. And where I think people go wrong as leaders is that they make it about them. And so they're looking at this leadership opportunity or this position as what do I have to do, to achieve the next level, or what do I have to do? And they're just focused around their goals and themselves. Yeah. And I used to tell my subordinates, the guys that my junior officers, you have two jobs as a leader, right? Number one is to create the next generation of leaders. Because if you're in a situation where you have influence over, let's just use this example, 400 people, and you're making it all about you, you're failing all of them. So it's, I need to be creating and actively trying to mentor and train and develop these leaders, because someday they're going to be in my position. Yep. And now they're going to have this influence, and they're going to influence all these people. And not only just from a practical standpoint of creating leaders that actually go out and fight our nation's wars, but let's just say from a recruiting standpoint. How does the Army recruit? How do you keep people in the ranks if they're disillusioned because of poor leadership? Of course. People leave because they're not being well led.
1,000%. Like you hear this all the time, that people don't leave companies, people leave managers. You know what I mean? You could be at Google, but if you have a crappy manager, you're not leaving Google. You probably actually like Google.
Right.
But I just hate the person I work for. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. There's a lot of people who stay at companies that they don't so much like love the company, but they love their team, and that keeps them there, and so that aspect, I think it's understated how important it is in every organization, the effectiveness and results.
Yeah.
Think about the difference between a mission working and not working. Most of them come down to leadership issues and execution.
Yeah. People leave because they're not being well led. And so, I looked at that opportunity as, okay, my job here is to create leaders in the Army.
Yeah.
Right. And my secondary job is to be self-aware enough to make them better than me.
Wow.
Right. So it's like, okay, now I'm going to mentor you and train you and coach you to be a good leader and tell you and hopefully pass on my wisdom. But I'm self-aware enough to know where I'm short, to know the mistakes that I've made. So let me help you try to be better than
You've got to be so proud. Like when you think back about your career and like impact, it's got to be so fulfilling. Like, cause that job is a job of service. You're serving people for 25 years. You know what I mean? Like, and that I just think you've got to look back and like be really proud that that's the career that you got to go spend your life in, and the impact, in other people's lives. Like if you're really focused, because not all people in those roles have that mentality. You know what I mean?
They don't. And that's where you get the toxic leaders, right? Is where, and it's toxic leaders are just, the name it's indicative in the name, but they're so toxic. They can do so much damage to an organization, right? Because they're just selfish, and it's all about
self-serving.
Them. They're self-serving, and it's unfortunate that the people that are self-serving, they have a way of mistreating those below them, but they sell well up.
Yeah.
Because they're all about like, what do I do to look good to my boss?
Those are the worst. Like those are the people that are literally the worst, that are like so good to the people above them and so bad to the people below them. Like honestly, like it like stirs up like this. People that kind of take advantage, or
you're right.
Because those are the ones who are vulnerable. You know what I mean? And like the other one's just charades. It's all charades. Showboating. It's acting.
It's acting, and they're putting on a show for those that are gonna affect their career.
Yeah,
right? And unfortunately, it works. People rise pretty high in organizations by being very ambitious that way, and just really focused on what do I got to do to sell well to the people that are making the decisions. And you don't always get the people below them that are getting polled on how much they like this leader, and sometimes they get a chance to move on before anything comes out or it's too late or whatever. And, in the military, in the leadership manual 7-0, there's actually now they actually have a chapter on toxic leadership, and they defined the traits of a toxic leader. Like, you see this happening, you see that happening, you see this happening. This is what toxic leadership is, and we have to try to avoid it. But it's still, and it's good, and that's one thing it briefs well right on paper, but it still happens
in practice.
In practice, it still happens because people still are able to kind of bamboozle their superiors and the ones that are making, and fake it long enough
to a point
in this position to kind of move to the next one.
You get found out over time. You know what I mean? Those people they get found out over time. Talk to me about what you're doing today, because I think it's so fascinating, and maybe delve in a little bit into the situation in Ukraine and what you're actually seeing on the ground.
I want to say one thing before I do that, Casey, and this was like, what is, you say you must feel so proud. You made that comment about my experience and and one of the things that I do feel that means the most to me is when, like, during my retirement ceremony, I had one of my junior officers that I'd worked with for a few years get up and say, the thing that's special about Colonel Roberts is that he makes everyone feel like they matter. Like you're their best friend, and everyone feels like that works for him. And, like, that meant a ton to me to know that I had, like, inspired him and had that kind of connection with him.
Because you'd aspired to be that way. Like, that was your intent.
Right. Because I realized that, you want people to follow you. You need to make them feel special. Right.
Well, a lot of times our intentions don't get, you don't, what you intend to do, that outcome doesn't. And so for him to be able to say it, you're like, it worked,
And one other example, like this, once again, makes me feel so proud of, what I am. One of the soldiers that was under my command in that, when I was a battalion commander, like, he is still in the guard here and he's doing stuff. He's actually helping people retire. So he's actually helping my wife retire. Right. We talked about this at the beginning. My wife's going through a retirement process. Yeah. When she went in and talked to him about helping retire, he was like, "Hey, are you Colonel Roberts' wife?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Man, I love that guy. That was my best time in the Army." Wow. And he's like, and so now he's like bending over backwards to help my wife because of the experience he had with me. And so that I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just saying that is what means a lot to me, is to have that kind of feedback, to know that, 5 years, 6 years down the road, this guy still remembers that.
You impacted his life.
As the highlight of his military career, getting to work in that environment that I established,
Yeah. Tony Robbins, he talks about business being a spiritual game. And I think leadership is a spiritual game. You know what I mean? Like, when I think about the sacred, when I think about, like, the stuff that really matters, it's that space where you can go touch people's lives in a way that impacts them. Yeah. Maybe changes their trajectory for the better, adds value for their life. And I think that's what you're describing is, the work that you did that made people's lives better.
So to hear little bits of feedback like that, and 5, 6 years down the road, kind of have that, just like,
so
I get
special.
A little bit emotional right here even talking about it, because that means so much to me, to know that I had that kind of influence, and that I was, to whatever degree I was successful in what I was trying to accomplish.
That's really special.
Leader. So super
cool. So you finish up, you retire, but you kind of got pulled right back into, it's not military, but it's similar. It's touching that world.
It is, and so it's comfortable for me. So what happened is I retired in 2021, right, the summer, right before, as the U.S. was pulling out of Afghanistan. So that summer, I'm watching all this all happen. I'm watching it like kind of horrified, just because I feel embarrassed as a country, that we are making these decisions, that we're leaving a lot of these people behind. We're not trying to do something to help them. And so a lot of us, like the veterans, especially guys that had served over there, multiple tours, and just had created relationships and still had people we knew over there that had served as interpreters that hadn't come over yet. They hadn't exercised that visa status. So we're watching this happen and just kind of fall apart with a pit in our stomach, and during that summer, like right near the end in August, my former interpreter, who I helped, come here and become a U.S. citizen and is raising his 2 kids now in Salt Lake, he calls me and he's like, "Hey, I got some of my family that's stuck. Can you help? Can you help them get out?" And I thought, well, shoot, man, I'll try.
Yeah.
So I had just retired and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up, now that I'm out of the Army after 27 years. And so I just go down this road of, okay, I'll try to help you and your family. And I thought, okay, well, in order to help, I need to raise money. And then, all right, in order to raise money, I need to start a nonprofit. Okay, so I got a nonprofit. What are we going to do? Like, what's our mission statement? And so I just kind of fell into starting this nonprofit in order to help people.
Yeah.
And we had this mission statement early on about just helping refugees, get rescued and reestablished. And so we just launched. Before I know it, we've got this list of like 200 Afghans that we're trying to help. And I got into the game a little bit late. So now it's August 31st. It's already, the U.S. has pulled out, it's closed. The relations are closing down. There's no more flights being, chartered out of there. And so we have to get creative with just, getting money into the country and helping people get across borders and getting them passports and in some cases like hiding them in safe houses and providing like food and just trying to help these people survive. So I get really involved in that. And we have this mission statement to help people and refugees. And I will say that I did about probably dozens of veteran organizations, nonprofit organizations popped up that summer for that mission.
Yeah.
I did two things different than all those other organizations. And one is that I didn't make my organization a veterans organization. I didn't want that label. I just wanted to be a humanitarian organization. And the other thing I did differently is that I made our mission statement kind of general. It was just about helping people,
more
about
broad.
Refugees. Yeah, more broad. It wasn't just focused on Afghanistan. So 6 months down the road, we're still trying to work with some of these Afghans and help them. And then Russia invades Ukraine and creates the biggest refugee crisis since World War II. And so we're like, well, shoot, this is our mission statement. We got to go. So within about 10 days after they invaded, we send our first team over to Ukraine. All the refugees are streaming out of the country and we're going in. And, we're still this small, scrappy, underfunded, organization who we don't have money or resources to throw at a problem. So we just have to try to
go figure it out
and be creative, And so, what we're doing is we go into the countries, we're looking for a niche to fill. Like we can't compete with these big organizations that are just going to come in and throw money at it. And we can't compete with like UN's going to set up refugee camps and stuff like that. So what we're looking for is like, where's a niche we can fill? What's not being done? Where's a population that's not being serviced? What's a niche that we can kind of fill to help people? And so we went in there and just started looking for that opportunity. And what we saw was that a lot of the big organizations, when you get too big, you become risk averse. You've got a lot of liability. And so they were kind of stuck in Poland. And a lot of the aid was flowing from all over the world was flowing into Poland, but it would get stuck there because there's only
so many people that can take it across.
So many people that were taking it in, exactly. And big, huge refugee camps in Poland that were being serviced by this aid, but a lot of people internally displaced still in Ukraine that needed the help. And so we realized early on, like, hey, we can grab this aid for free or for pennies on the dollar in Poland, and we can transport it into Ukraine and then distribute it, where it's needed. So initially, like the first year of the war, we just set up like a logistics operation where we had a little warehouse in central Ukraine. We'd find aid, being scrappy. We'd try to find it for free or for cheap, a dollar, pennies on the dollar, and we'd pay for it. And then we'd take it in and distribute it. And we work with other Ukrainian organizations to distribute it to the front lines. And they would go run to the front lines, and we were just servicing. And we found little niches. Like we found like this kind of an old folks home, basically. Like, so these were elderly people that were living in some type of elderly home and in an area of Ukraine that was occupied. So now they're completely displaced. And so the government of Ukraine is just finding some place to put them. So it puts them in this old abandoned, like Russian school. And it's like this, you've got old people in an old like cement building, being heated by firewood, like 8, it's like a classroom with like 8 elderly people in beds. And there's like 2 people there trying to take care of 40 elderly that need help. And there's, 1 bathroom. And so we would find little situations like that and kind of adopt to that place.
Wow. And
be like, hey, we're going to bring you food every week. We're going to bring some new mattresses in here.
You were just looking at like for something to go make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. So we just fell into that. It was, I would tell you that's been it felt to me like, now that I've started doing it, it's kind of like we talked about in the beginning, like where, delivering pizzas wasn't doing it for me, but being in the military felt like something meaningful.
Yeah.
Well, now going into this nonprofit work where I get to help people, it feels meaningful. It's really, really hard work, but
really fulfilling.
But it's very fulfilling. And so like I want to keep doing it. I want to make it work because it just feels like I'm making a difference.
So it probably leads me to my last question. Talk to me about where God fits in the mix. Talk to me about, faith and kind of your experience over your entire career. Like, where does faith fit into all this stuff for you?
I think that it's, faith, like I think there's faith in, a higher being. And then there's also kind of faith of like your purpose, or like, what is it that why are we here? Are we here just to serve ourselves, or are we here to serve other people? And it's hard for me to, not being a really particular religious person, it's hard for me to say that I believe in this, ethos or this, theology.
Of course.
But I do think that we inherently know what right and wrong is. That's kind of built into us for some reason, right? And I think that there's, we can find purpose and meaning that is going to help us nourish that spark in each of us. That, wherever that comes from, like wherever you believe that comes from.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me,
because there's obviously something calling you,
right?
Like there's something calling you to go forward,
right,
and to serve,
right. And
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so it's fascinating because I know, like me and you've talked about it. Like, you're not like a very like religious person. Like, that's not like an ethos isn't something that, but you're obviously driven by something. There's something calling to you, saying you need to give more, you need to serve more. So there is a philosophy that you're following. There is like,
right. And mine doesn't necessarily have a doctrine, that says you got to do this, you got to do that. I feel like, we, at some point, we die, maybe we'll have answers, and maybe we won't. But in the meantime, I think that there is evil in this world, and if there's a quote, that all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to stand by and do nothing.
Yeah,
and I think that those of us that are kind of called to do something, you need to exercise that, and try to make a difference, right? So for me, it's like I'm going to follow that inner calling wherever it comes from, to continue to try to help people, to serve. It feels meaningful for me. Like I'm not one of those people that can just kind of sit back and it's just not in me.
Talk to me. This will be the real last one, but talk to me about identity. Because I think what you're describing is, this is who I am. I am this, I am this, I am this. Like, talk to me about when you're like describing, this is who I am. Like, this is why I was put on earth.
Yeah.
Like, what are those words that you say, this is who I am, this is my identity?
I think it's, my wife, she's like, well, how come you always have to do big things? And I'm like, well, I never saw it that way. I'm just trying to do something that's meaningful. And I think that one of the things I wish that, Casey, we talked about journeying from high school and like trying to figure things out. We don't know who we are. I wish that I would have had more self-awareness earlier in life, and I think that part of that is just our natural course of like gaining wisdom, progression. And you get to your 40s and you're like, oh man, I'm finally starting to figure this out, and maybe, right. I wish I'd have had more of that self-awareness earlier in life. But I think one of the things, identity, that I've figured out about myself and I accept now, right, is that I want to do things that I feel like matter. I want to I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit, for other people. And I believe in, a greater good and having a purpose. And I think that we can create that purpose for ourselves. And I think that, our gifts, whether they be God-given or wherever they come from, are something that we have to try to put to use, for the betterment of people in society. And I don't, so how do you do that? You can't let that opportunity be wasted with those God-given, gifts and talents that you have. So however that manifests itself, we've got to find that path.
I think about this parable a lot in the Bible, this parable of the talents.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the master that gives 1 talent and 2 talents and 3 talents to the servants. Then he leaves. And the one with 5 turns it into 10.
Right.
And the one with 2 turns it into 4. And the master comes back and, is so happy that they were able to take their talents and multiply them and make a difference. And then he's really frustrated with the one that hid the talent that buried the talent out of fear.
Right.
And he takes the talent and gives it to the person that's doing something. And I think about that story and I think about your life, and there's got to be like some element of like, you've done a lot with your talents, like the gifts that you've been given. I'm seeing the impact that you made on I'm a random person. I'm a random observer in the journey. But I had a beautiful experience, getting to know you and being led by you and kind of, being a customer of yours, at this gym. But then also just seeing the impact you've made serving your country, and now the impact that you're making just with like a desire to do good, a desire to serve and serve the people that can't serve themselves. And I just think, my philosophical belief is that, that someday I'm going to go meet my maker. And I'm going to have that kind of same conversation of, hey, this is my report. I was given this and I did my best.
Yeah.
And, you get emotional just talking about it. But I really do think you've lived a beautiful life up until this point. But what gets me excited is you've got a lot of sprint left in your legs. And I'm fascinated to go watch you in the next stages of this journey and to see what this desire to serve turns into, because you have all this relevant experience, all this relevant life experience. And even just the financial boxes are kind of checked as far as being able to have your needs met. So it kind of frees up this time to focus on these higher level things. Yeah. It's really cool. Like it fires me up. Me and my wife are going through the same thing where she's going back and she's doing her MBA with this desire to go figure out, how do I go make the biggest dent in the world? How do I take the resources and the talents that we've been given and go be a force for good and a force for God in the world. So anyway, thanks for coming in. I've loved our conversation, care about you as a person. I think you have a beautiful soul. You got a big heart. And, I've always felt that. And I'm always, been cheering for you. I remember seeing that, your retirement. And I was just like, man, that had to have been such a special day. You go spend 26, 27 years and to be able to celebrate, a really beautiful career serving our country. So thank you.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. And I can see you getting, emotional. And I've got emotional a couple of times just talking about, leadership and impact and trying to influence people. And because I think it's, at the end of the day, it's all about people, right? And I think we could put that first. Then we're going to be successful, or we're going to make those impacts. And I appreciate your comments. Thank you so much.
No, thanks, brother. Thanks for coming in.